Welcome to Persuasion Under Pressure. I'm Dave Westerholm. Thank you for your interest, and here's what you'll be doing. This course stems from my work with professional negotiators, but it's designed for you as long as you feel you would benefit from being able to move more people more gracefully toward your way of thinking. Why pressure? Because anyone can be suave under ordinary circumstances. That's why they call them ordinary. But if you want to be unusually valuable, be persuasive when the pressure's on. If you're a salesperson, being persuasive under pressure means closing a deal with a skeptical client, or a new one, or one who feels that they've been burned. A buyer, it means talking a key supplier into doing something that's new and innovative and uncomfortable for them, but which renders competitive advantage. If you are a technical person, or a creative person, or a change agent, it means expressing difficult ideas in ways that are strategically designed to move people. And if you're a manager of human beings, well, it's all day, every day, isn't it? Getting people to do what they don't necessarily want to. Getting them to believe. And in your personal life, any argument, any dispute, any disagreement necessarily comes along with a certain amount of pressure. Now, what if you could handle that pressure with aplomb? What if you could be strategic when other people are hanging on by their nails? What if you had the tools to build solutions when others are at the end of their tether? What if you could make friends instead of frustration? And if you could do that, if you could be maximally persuasive and effective when the pressure's on, when wouldn't you be? The first thing you need to know is this course is based on 20 years of my experience teaching business people to negotiate. And in the early going, something became clear that was unusual, and it took me a while to figure out exactly what was going on. In tough situations, most of us spend most of our time defending our interests, trying not to lose, battling to keep from ending up on the short end of the stick. But what I found was a very small percentage of people tended to spend the vast majority of their time endeavoring to persuade people over toward their way of thinking, even in the toughest of circumstances. And it was odd. It was compelling. And mostly, it was surprisingly successful. And once you do the math on it, it actually makes sense. The more you're able to persuade someone over toward your way of thinking, the less there is to negotiate, the easier it's going to be to get an outcome. I mean, I guess in an optimal kind of circumstance, you could say the best way to bridge a gap is to bring somebody all the way over to your way of thinking. Now, that's going to be hard in the best of circumstances. But in truly pressure-filled circumstances, we as human beings tend to fall back upon a conventional human set of behaviors that is predictable, comprehensible, as it turns out, mostly negative, usually defensive, and very, very rarely optimal. And so this negative dynamic tends to cause us to lose focus, to forsake our persuasive strategy, if we even had one, and to all but toss out our capacity to persuade right out the window. Now that's where persuasion under pressure comes in. It's about composure. It's about understanding this dynamic better than the next person. It's about getting out, getting clear, getting above the fray, and pulling other people along with you. Persuasion under pressure combines some useful recent research, which we will endeavor to master, combined with a professional negotiating perspective, and linked to a kind of common sense analysis of why it is that persuasive people get away with so much more than we do. What it is they actually do. First, there's science. We want this to be as meaty and practical, as pragmatic as possible. And some science has become available for us to lean on over the last, 10 years that really hasn't been disseminated out in the real world yet. So it can give us a leg up and give us a competitive advantage. It comes from the realm of cognitive science. These are people, scientists, who look at the brain from an engineering perspective and they kind of reverse engineer it. They try to figure out why we make the choices that we make. And so as a result, it's an extraordinarily clear-headed way to look at processes that we normally take for granted and to become clear-headed ourselves. Now that should convey a kind of obvious advantage, right? But it's hard. It's an unusual way of looking at the world, so we'll spend a goodly amount of time on it. If we do it right, your understanding of the science itself actually becomes a leavening device. It makes it easier for you to spot when you're being drawn into a negative dynamic. And so you'll be quicker to pull out, quicker to start to strategize, and quicker to come up with ways to try to bring the other person along with you. So there's a real efficiency in that. We don't want to understand it just for understanding's sake. We don't want to understand because it'll make you look good at cocktail parties, which it will. It's actually a device. It's a way for us to kind of get an edge. Now, what do you do with your new understanding? You go to charm school for the charmless. And what do we mean by charm? We'd better come up with a kind of hard-nosed definition, right? Now, you might be thinking in terms of being humorous or companionable, but it's much more than that. We're talking about a class of person who deploys a social strategy that allows them to be at once better liked and to get more done than the rest of us. People with charm are odd in that they don't tend to take things personally. They do tend to be ruthlessly positive and persistent. They tend to treat people as if they're more important than ideas. They bring home deals that make other people shake their heads. They tend to pull relationships out of contentious environments and seem to enjoy that as a challenge. They get permission more readily and forgiven more quickly. And if you ever watch them in action, it's like an unfair advantage. Now, turns out, charm is a thing. It can be emulated. It can be encapsulated. We can put it in a box. There are behaviors. Turns out those behaviors are almost entirely counterintuitive, but nonetheless, we will steal all the ideas we can from all the highly charming people we can come up with from across the globe. And in the end, they will be deployable. They will fit into our overarching understanding, and they will extend what you can accomplish. At the end of this process, you will be functionally charming, if not actually so. Once charming, we can start to engage in real practical sorts of behaviors. And above all else, you'll learn to ask questions. Really, really hard, right? This is the hardest discipline. There's sales literature out there, great research that's been done that says that the smartest thing a salesperson can do is ask questions. It's the single most profitable operation they can do. But we don't. We like to lecture. And we like to tell people what they should think. And so asking questions is a discipline we need to work on. And there are several reasons and several benefits and several types of questions. By asking the right kinds of questions, you'll actually learn the other person's position. And it'll often surprise you that they don't think the way they think for the reasons that you think. And how are you, by the way, going to bring them over to your way of thinking if you don't really understand why they're thinking the way that they are? It'll show us a certain amount of respect, and it'll give you the kind of vocabulary you need to gently walk somebody out from under their own way of thinking and gently walk them into the way of thinking that you believe is better for you and better for them. Next, strategy. We want to be more strategic than the next person. What questions are you going to ask? And how are you going to ask them in a way that is likely to lead someone to the place where you wanted them to be? And is that possible, the place you want them to be? These are all functions of strategy, knowing where to start and where to finish, and how to get there in between. This will be the first time that you bring strategy to a circumstance that other people just haggle, right? What you'll be doing. Well, there's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of interaction. I mean, for example, lots and lots of exercises. We'll be doing business negotiations. You're called upon to come up with a persuasive strategy to salvage somebody's public image. We'll be looking at circumstances in which you have no leverage, sort of change management type things, and how you use persuasion to do the best you can in a trying circumstance like that. And of course, we'll be arguing. We'll be simulating interpersonal arguments. You'll have an argument with a spouse or significant other right in front of other people. And one of the things that needs to be said about this is it's fun. Because we're stupid. I mean, if you abstract it, and you're going to be in a place where you can abstract it very well, if you abstract it, having an argument over politics with an in-law at the Thanksgiving table, that's pretty stupid. What's the statistical likelihood you're going to get a good outcome from that, right? Ever have? Arguing with a peer at work about something that is manifestly in your self-interest but not really to them, just because you want it. What's the likelihood that's going to come out well? it becomes so painfully obvious that the normal route that people do to solve these problems or not solve them is so inefficient that we laugh. We'll laugh a lot. And that very laughter, finding it funny, is something that helps leaven you and make you into a different kind of person. Someone who pulls out of these negative processes faster, sooner, and more productively than other people do. Let's be clear. This is a discipline. It takes knowledge, new knowledge, practice, persistence, focus, common sense, strategy, and couples it with a desire to make things happen by drawing closer rather than further away. For most people, this represents a rather significant change in perspective and a pretty big change in technique. It's going to take some work. On the other hand, let's also be clear. Persuasion under pressure sets loose your better nature to range over events and in a kind of muscular way to influence them in a fashion that tends to work out better for all involved. The only way to get a competitive advantage in the marketplace is to do valuable things differently or better. And in a world that's all too quick to deploy negative tactics by default, even when those can be shown to be demonstratively less efficient, you'll be doing valuable things differently and better. Of all the skill sets that contribute to success, which is likely to have more impact on your life than being able to persuade?